Hello everyone, new video here. Today is Sunday, December 15th, 2024. This is why you should not believe in the Trinity, Part 8. The Son of Man in Daniel and in the New Testament disproves the Trinity. You know, often when we talk about Daniel with Trinitarians, the text that usually comes up is in chapter 7, in the Aramaic section of Daniel, for which we also have Greek translations. Trinitarians, as you're going to see, like to say that the Son of Man is given a form of worship there, according to the Greek version, that they say uses a verb latruo, that Jesus in the New Testament says is to be given to God alone when Satan ask him to bow before him. Of course, that was before Jesus received all the authority that's described in Daniel 7. And so Trinitarians who make this argument are misapplying Jesus' teaching when talking to Satan about latruo, which is, of course, the Greek term that was translated from his Hebrew-Aramaic discussion with Satan. Either way, that's the term used in the Gospels, and that's fine. Fact is, at that time, that was true. But that does not preclude God giving somebody authority and power to represent him and to receive what is due to him for his glory. That aside, I don't believe Trinitarians should be arguing or can argue that the Son of Man receives latruo in Daniel 7:14. I'm not saying there aren't Greek manuscripts that use latruo, but it's by no means a strong enough reading to be using as part of one's argument theologically that you're going to condemn people over if they don't accept. That's inappropriate, right? That's unacceptable. And yet, we've seen recently, in my discussions and involvement with Jake Brancantella and William Albrecht on Justin Martyr, that Trinitarians have been lying to everybody and saying that Justin Martyr applies latruo from Daniel 7:14 to Jesus. No, he does not. In fact, not only is Justin Martyr's text from the 14th century and following, it changes what we typically have as the Greek reading of Daniel 7:14, as I discussed on one of my appearances with Jake and separately. It removes the pronoun auto that in the Greek version of Daniel specifies that the verb latruo or deluo, as you'll see, is to be given to the Son of Man. It's only that pronoun that does that. Without that pronoun, there is no specificity, and the subject in the context could be either the Son of Man or the Ancient of Days Most High. So there's no reason for Justin to change that reading unless he didn't believe or want to at least have latruo specified to the Son of Man. Now, as it turns out, Justin's one of the few Greek readings that actually have latruo in Daniel 7:14. But again, his text is from the 14th century or following. And he changes it so it doesn't apply to the Son of Man. So I don't see how anyone can credibly cite Justin Martyr's text as evidence for the Trinity. Of course not, right? He doesn't believe in the Trinity. He's a Middle Platonist. We've talked about it. But you can't cite Justin Martyr and claim he's applying latruo from Daniel 7:14 to the Son of Man. No, he's not. So not only is his text not a early evidence for a reading of latruo in Daniel 7:14, it's a later reading, right? We don't have a text of Justin anywhere near the time when Justin is said to have lived that has latruo in Daniel 7:14. text we have is far removed, as I said, over 1,000 years, 1,200 from when Justin lived. And it changes it so it doesn't even apply to the Son of Man. So he's out of the category of evidence for Trinitarians and really never was in it, except for their lies, right? So now, what about the text of Daniel 7:14 in the Greek version? And what does the Aramaic text say? Well, the main issue has to do with Daniel 7:14 and Daniel 7:27. But really, it's Daniel 7:13 and 14, as you're going to see. And there are two main issues in those texts, 7:13 and 14, related to the Son of Man, we're going to get into right now. And one of those involves Latruo. But I wanted to point out that you're going to see there is no reason to allow Trinitarians to continue to use Daniel 7:14. There's not a stable text to be usable in that argument. You at best have a variant reading with some manuscript support, not even the most manuscript support, some early manuscript support, but one, P967, you're going to see Codex B, Codex A, other texts. No, they say doulouo. Forms of doulouo. I'm going to show you how you can show that to Trinitarians real easily, okay? But the idea that we have been, the fact that we have been allowing them to act like Daniel 7:14 just undisputably uses Latruo is insane. So Justin Martyr doesn't apply Latruo to the Son of Man and can't be cited as early evidence for Latruo, period. And we really only have one text, early text, that says Latruo. So we'll get to that in a moment, but it's very important you understand you can't use a disputed reading like that, where the evidence is like either even or not in your favor. You've got to have a really good argument to be saying that a disputed reading with equal support on another reading or more support on another reading is not to be preferred, and somehow we're supposed to use an inferior reading as a basis for establishing concrete doctrine used to condemn people. That's insane. Okay, if you do that, you're crazy. You're a pervert, and you're probably part of the Dragon Church. That's what they're doing, though. It's insane. All the variants and questionable things they're using to build their false theology and try to connect it, right? These are the same people, everybody, who will look at Justin Martyr's heteros, theos, theos, heteros. I don't care. William does. They mean the same thing. Another God. Even makes it clear by illustration, right? One fire from another without lessening the first, but they're two separate, right? And these Trinitarians can't even figure out which illustration is Justin's and not, right? That's how stupid they are. Or just perverted, right? They'll do anything for their doctrine. Another God becomes another person, even in a Middle Platonist. So they do the same thing in John 1:1, both for the Word and the God the Word is with, right? They're applying 4th century Roman paganism to 3rd and 2nd century Middle Platonism and 1st century Christian teachings. These guys are insane. It's all back. It's all from later backwards. Ours is all from the source forwards. And it's easy to show, like I'm going to do right now. Let's go. Daniel 7. Let me bring it up. I'm just going to show the NWT here because, again, I'm going to talk about the disputed issues. And this way it'll also be a way to show you who use NWT, since we deal a lot with Trinity and Watchtower related subjects, some of the differences you need to be aware of. All right, so let's just take a look. Son of Man and Daniel. The real key texts are in Daniel 7, but we'll read a couple more as well. Daniel 7:13, I kept on beholding in the visions of the night, and see there, with the clouds of the heavens, someone like a son of man happened to be coming. And 2, In the brackets, I have heos, unto, versus hos, as or like. Those are two variant readings we'll get to in a moment. The Ancient of Days, he gained access. Oh, we got Dada here. He came. I'm going to acknowledge him just so he doesn't start making unusual sounds. Hi, Dada. I'm doing a recording. And I was really hoping you won't make loud, piercing meow sounds. So we're going to hope on that, okay? Good job, buddy. I try to encourage, people and animals, solical beings. Back to the text. All right, so we'll get to this heos versus hos. Does that mean they brought him to, or he's as or like the Ancient of Days? And then they or those with or around them brought him before that one. Verse 14, and to him, that is the Son of Man, they were given rulership, dignity, and kingdom. And that's critical, is it not? Right? I mean, so whoever this is being given some pretty significant things here. Wouldn't you say, right? Rulership, dignity, and kingdom. Yeah, God, excuse me, already has all those things from eternity, and never does anyone ever have to give him those things. So right there, it should be clear to anybody, the Son of Man we're talking about is not God. Now again, some people try to say he's as or like God, that this heos, which means unto, is really hos, which means as or like. Not even the same, really, just as or like, kind of like kathos. Remember we were talking about the other day, how hos is really related to kathos, kata and hos. So they mean like or similar, both of them, just a slightly different focus or emphasis in terms of their usage. But they rarely, if ever, mean just an absolute one-to-one equality. So Trinitarians just try to make that argument without accounting for all the contradictory examples when it comes to texts like in John 5, where they think it can support their doctrine. It can and it doesn't. Either way, even if we accept, as we'll get to further in a moment, hos here, and as the Ancient of Days, he came and they brought him up before that one. Right? I'm going to argue it doesn't really make as much sense, although the Greek readings which have some of these changes also change other words, which we'll get to further in a moment, so that it makes more sense than changing one of the words as part of the New World Translation here, okay? So just hang tight, but just know that that's one of the key differences. Heos, unto, or hos, as the Ancient of Days. Is the Son of Man getting access to the Ancient of Days, or is he appearing like or as the Ancient of Days? There's a variant reading here. I still think it's fairly clear, not as clear as Latruo and Duluo, but either way, we have the Hebrew text that is clear. It's really not a question at all in the Hebrew text that it says to the Ancient of Days. I'm sorry, Aramaic. Daniel 7's in Aramaic, but it's still very clear. So, nevertheless, the Greek does have this variant, like with Latruo. The Aramaic is also clear in Daniel 7, 14, where it concerns this service, right? Pelak. So the issue really has to do with the Greek reading and what that means, primarily because of what Jesus says in the New Testament, that it's only to be given to God in a context with Satan, where he hasn't been given the authority like he's given here, where he, like God, can receive the things he's given, but that God already has. Peoples, national groups, and languages all serving him. And this is the part right here that's not in Justin, right? The to him, the auto, in the Greek part. But right here is where in the Greek part we get this difference. Duluo, I'm just using a W for the transliteration of the omega. Duluo, serve, or latruo, more of a religiously serve. Okay, so the Aramaic is palak. It's not really disputable or creates a problem. But the, again, Greek reading, because of Jesus' use of latruo in Matthew and in Luke, the text that use the Greek verb latruo, Trinitarians try to say, well, that proves, something related to the Trinity, which it doesn't, because again, look, he's given these things. This is contingent authority, like I talked about just the other day in my Revelation 21 video, and we'll talk about again here in a moment. This is not the same kind of authority, not the same rulership, not the same dignity, not the same kingdom in any way that the God who's giving him these things already has. If you don't understand the critical, foundational, fundamental difference there, that if you always already have something, rulership, dignity, and kingdom, authority, versus someone who doesn't have those things always, but who's given them because of something he does, you don't understand the difference there and why one is different from the other no matter what, you're not a Christian, okay? You're someone who believes something different and who doesn't accept fundamental differences in terms of the things a person has and why they're given certain forms of service. One is because they always have it. The other is because they're given it. That's all the difference that matters where it concerns equality with God. His rulership, referring to the Son of Man, is an indefinitely lasting rulership that will not pass away. His kingdom, one that will not be brought to ruin. So he's being given this kingdom. It literally says that right here. Rulership, dignity, and kingdom. As a result of that, he's given a form of service. Is it deluo? Serve? Like the way, it's a little more common service. Like the way a slave to a master. So it's a very serious service, but it's just more applicable than latruo, especially given Jesus' use of latruo, according to the Greek of Matthew and Luke. Which is fine, again, according to the time and the context in which he says those words. But Trinitarians never contextualize things, even though they talk about hermeneutics, and they like to try to fool people and pretend they know things while they're not answering questions because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's so funny to me to watch these people. And then they totally collapse when it comes to their own principles, not being able to contextualize Jesus' words in relation to the fulfillment of these very texts, which are not during the time he's with Satan. They're after that, after he conquers and sits down. We'll get to that in a moment. But the holy ones of the Supreme One will receive the kingdom. They'll take possession of the kingdom for an indefinite time or time indefinite, even for time indefinite upon times indefinite. 21, I kept on beholding when that very horn made war upon the holy ones, prevailing against them until the Ancient of Days came. Judgment itself was given in favor of the holy ones. Notice here, it's the Ancient of Days who decides what happens to the holy ones. Now again, the question would be for Trinitarians, is the Son of Man appearing as or to the Ancient of Days? So we'll get to that in a moment. But still, it explicitly states it's the Ancient of Days who has to come and give favor in behalf of the holy ones. And then the holy ones take possession of the kingdom. 24, and as for the 10 horns, out of that kingdom there are 10 kings that rise up. And still another one will rise up after them, and he himself will be different from the first ones. And 3 kings he will humiliate. Verse 25, he will speak even words against the Most High. He will harass continually the holy ones themselves of the Supreme One. And he will intend to change times and law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, and times, and half a time. And the court itself proceeded to sit, and his own rulership they finally took away, in order to annihilate him and destroy him totally. Verse 27, and the kingdom and the rulership and the grandeur of the kingdoms under all the heavens were given to the people, who are the holy ones of the Supreme One, or Most High. Their kingdom is an indefinitely lasting kingdom. All the rulerships will serve halak, and obey, shema, even them or him. It depends. So either way, in the Greek version, it doesn't use latruo here, although there are variant readings because the connection with the Son of Man isn't really apparent here, right? It's really the Holy Ones of the Supreme One and and potentially the Holy One himself, right? The one who's arrived and who's also kind of the subject running through to this point, right? The Ancient of Days comes, gives judgment. Then the 10 kings, another king rises up, speaks against the Most High. The Holy Ones become the subject. The court sits down. Rulership's taken away, given to the Holy Ones, right? So this is kind of, there's no Son of Man is what I'm getting at. So it doesn't really become an issue here. And the Greek readings aren't as favorable to the latruo, deluo variation. In most of the Greek text, you will see there are other Greek verbs used here. So that's why we're not going to get off on that. Daniel 8:19, and he went on to say here, I'm causing you to know what will occur in the final part of the denunciation, because it is for the appointed time, the end. Just giving a little context. Right, and then we get to the old Daniel 12. Michael stands up, great prince. Those asleep in the ground will wake up, shine like the brightness. Book sealed up until the time of the end, right? So there's a lot going on in Daniel with respect to the Son of Man, and then, of course, to Michael. But if we focus just on the Son of Man, okay, let's look first at this deluo latruo. What is the strength of the readings here? Well, here it is. Here is essentially the support for the deluo and latruo readings. So I've put what each source supports here. So Theodotion, mid-2nd century AD, revised a Greek translation of the Old Testament, used deluo. P967, this is really the main text for the latruo reading. Okay, I'll just leave that in black and I'll highlight their witness in blue to separate them. And I'll make deluo the variant, just for Trinitarians. Even though you're going to see, so in Codex A, 5th century, right? One of the main New Testament codices. Codex B, 4th century. I meant to make that red. Another one of the main New Testament and biblical codices uses deluo. Codex Q, 6th century, also an important witness to the Old Testament in Greek, uses deluo. Codex Gamma, Cryptopheratensis, 8th century AD, uses deluo. 87-88 Codex Chissianus, 9th to 11th century AD, uses latruo. You'll see 87-88 for this one, because they reference different parts of this codex. So you can see pretty clearly here before we get to heos and hos. You know, this isn't every single Greek reading, but these are the main ones. Okay. Now I would also add, you could also add the Syro-Hexapla. I'll just go ahead and do that. Syr-Hexapla. That's 7th century. It's a Syriac translation of the 5th column of Origen's Hexapla. So, which contains different columns of the Septuagint, several in Greek. So let me add that here. It's still, this is a Syriac translation though from the 7th century, but I'm going to put it in. so we can have the full, at least full main representation of the Latruo readings. So the Syriac translation used in the 7th century would be consistent with Latruo from the Greek reading that it's translated from. So it's appropriate to give that. But as you can see, even with that, make this a little smaller to fit on one page. It's not that Latruo doesn't have any reading. I didn't say that. But the way Trinitarians have been presenting Daniel 7:14, not just in Justin, which we've dealt with sufficiently, but here in Daniel 7:14, the Greek reading really is not conclusively Latruo at all. In fact, you could make a very good argument, and I will, that Duluo is the preferred reading. We have the main Christian codices that have this reading. Sinaiticus doesn't have Daniel. So Alexandrinus and Vaticanus, this is what most of the people in the church would have been using around those times in the 4th and 5th century and following. So even though P967 is from the 2nd to 3rd century, Theodotion is from the mid-2nd century, and he shows Duluo. So it's not that Latruo is the earliest Greek reading. It's not. But it is in an early, relatively speaking, compared to all the other dates of the texts that we have of Daniel 7:14. It is one of our earlier readings. But it's not one of our main readings, I would argue. No, it's one of our main readings, I'm sorry. But it's certainly not enough to outweigh all of those. Now, I mean, if you start to add all these together, again, I think it gets a little more even, but I would still give the nod to Duluo. And certainly, right, there's no way, unless you're Sam Shamoon and you're desperate beyond belief to try to find something to tie your doctrine around and then try to snare something in the Bible with your false doctrine. There's really nothing here. Just a variant reading that you could cite. That's okay. It's okay to cite a contested reading and say, like I did with the variant readings in Codex A in comparison to the readings, other readings, Greek readings in Revelation. I acknowledge that the Codex A wasn't the only Greek reading, but it presented a textual reading from Revelation 1 to Revelation 22 that showed a similar understanding to how we were looking at first and last in Revelation 1:17 and 2:8 verses in 22. So that's important. And it's an important difference to note in comparison to other readings, especially since that's one of our best readings, text, Alexandrinus of Revelation. So it's important to keep in mind this information at a minimum so that you can show Trinitarians, hey, not only is Jesus' use of Latruo before he received what we read about in Daniel 7 that leads, in your view, to him receiving Latruo, it's not even a likely scenario that that's what he used or that that's the term in Daniel. We already know it's not in Justin, how it's applied to him. It's the term used, Latruo, but he changes the reading, and it's late. Right? It's later than all the readings I just showed you. So it's a contested reading, and Trinitarians cannot make their point on it. They can reference it, and that's it. And the fact that it's a contested reading and not even supported by the reading that would have been taught mostly in the church in the 4th to 6th centuries, it's not enough to establish a doctrine around and say, You don't understand the Son of Man, Jesus, in Daniel 7, receiving the Truo, so that when he tells Satan only God is to receive the Truo, that means Trinity. You're insane, okay? You don't have sufficient textual basis to proclaim that as the Greek reading for Daniel 7:14. And it's more likely that that's not the Greek reading based on the evidence that we do have. Further, it's a contingent authority that he's given, rulership, dignity, and kingdom by the Most High. There's no question about him being given it. We'll get to the whole unto or as thing in a moment. But it's a contingent authority, rulership, and dignity and kingdom. It's not eternal. It's not the same as the Most High's himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to be given it. Foundational. You don't understand that? Not going to be able to communicate with you. So there are a couple ways you can show people, if you don't really know a lot about Greek or you know some, and you want to have some evidence around. It's not always easy to pull up all the manuscripts. I mean, do your best, and I'll do my best to provide what I can. But I'm giving you the references so you can at least see what most people aren't contesting. Okay? So this is a copy of Sweet's edition of the Old Testament in Greek. Is volume 3. Right? So it's one that you can get either in its original version or reprinted form. I recommend you try to get a copy because it has a lot of readings from different Septuagint texts, like Codex Q from the 6th century. So once you get familiar with it, you'll be able to kind of get a sense of different variant readings if you're able to make sense of Greek. So if you look on page volume 3, page 549, it's kind of what it looks like. But so, and again, you kind of have to get used to, there's some older symbols used and things, but you can kind of figure it out. Either way, it'll show you the text of Vaticanus, has the text of Chisianus, 87. And then in the footnotes on page 549 to Daniel 7:14, on the main text, on page 549 of volume 3, Daniel 7:14. On the right side, it says, Kai glossai, du lucen auto. So form of duluo, right there in the main text, on Sweet's edition, page 549. Now on the left side, and where it gives 87, the manuscript from Chisianus of the 9th century, it gives from 87, Daniel 7:14, and it says, Kai pasadoxa auto la tru usa. Like what we were reading when we were talking about Justin Martyr, only Justin Martyr doesn't use the pronoun like you see is used here in Daniel 7:14, at least in 87. Auto. But it does use a form of latruo, just like I showed you here. Down at the bottom, 87-88 Codex Chisianus. So that's what you'll see if you look on the left side of Sweet's volume 3, page 548. Now, in the notes, if you look on the bottom of 548, you'll see the note to 14. It points out how the Syriac, the translation I referenced earlier, the Syro-Hexapla, uses la truusa, la truo, and just like I showed you here in my chart, the Syro-Hexapla, la truo. It says 87 Syr. And then that's all it shows on 548 under the 87 side. But on the 549 side, where it shows Codex B and it uses Duluo, in the notes it says I'm sorry, it's so tiny. Duluusin? Is that what it says? Let me see. Dulususin. I'm just using this little magnifier because it's so tiny. Sweets. My eyes are pretty good, but the lighting isn't that great right here. So either way, okay. Dulususin auto. Auto dulususin. So reverse the pronoun. And then it lists Codex A. And then it says dulususin or hyphen lusus auto Codex Q. And then it uses out as abbreviation Dulususin Kai Hippacusantai. And that's Codex G or Cryptoferratensis right here. So that's what you're going to see. If you look on 549, you'll see that reference. You'll see this reference. This is the main text, and this is also in the notes. Okay? So I'm showing you, I'm just trying to point out that it's small type, right? But you can get probably bigger version. Either way, that's how you can use Sweets edition at Daniel 7:14. Now, a more popular edition of the Septuagint, more commercial edition, is Brenton's, right? The Septuagint with Apocrypha, Sir Lancelot Brenton. I recommend you get a copy. It gives you basically the Greek text of Vaticanus with some Alexandrinus readings and an English translation. It's a little older, but still, you can use this. You can take this to Trinitarians. If you get a copy of this, it's really easy to get this. Sweets is too. It's just a little more difficult, and it's all in Greek. And if you get the original, again, it's going to be in pretty small print. So at Daniel 7:14, if you show a Trinitarian this on page 1061, okay, if you take them there, where it shows Daniel 7:14, I beheld the night vision, and lo, one coming on the clouds of heaven as the Son of Man, came to the Ancient of Days and was brought near to him, given rulership, dignity, and kingdom, and all nations and tribes and languages shall serve him. Right across from that, it says, glossai auto dulususin, a form of duluo, because that's what Codex B reads. So this would be like a real easy way to show them, no, it doesn't say latruo in one of our main codices that was used throughout the early church, or at least since Constantine, right? Time of Constantine. This is another version of the Septuagint. This is the one I actually translate from because I'm most familiar with it, Rolf's Septuaginta. It's gone through several editions, but if you happen to have a copy of this, okay, it's all in Greek though, so like Sweets, it's going to be a little more technical to use. But if you have a copy and you go to page, looks like 9, 14, and 15, right? This is what it's going to look like. Okay. So you're going to see on page 914, Daniel 7:14. Now, it splits it up a little differently. It gives what it considers the Septuagint reading on the top, or the Old Greek, and then what you could consider Theodosian's reading, the mid-2nd century, the earliest one on the list I showed you. I'll show you it again. But you also have to kind of be careful there with some of these editions and the symbols they use, like I mentioned. They don't always correspond the way I just mentioned. And by Old Greek, sometimes they can mean just P967, the oldest reading like probably is here. because on the the top side, it shows both, right? See that line right there? That line separates two different versions of Daniel in Greek in Rolf's. So on the top reading, which is based on mostly P967, the 2nd, 3rd century Latrua reading, that's what it says. Pasadoxalto Latrusa. But below that, where it has the theta for the Theodosian reading, it uses Deluo. Glossai alto du lu susan. And the Rolf's footnotes, it just says that it says auto dul, it abbreviates Duluo. And then it gives du lu susan, and it lists Vaticanus and Alexandrinus. That's on the bottom part of the page. On the top part, doesn't really give any information on the Old Greek reading, the Septuagint, quote-unquote, reading. So Rolf's will show you the Vaticanus and Alexandrinus Duluo reading, as well as show you Duluo in the Theta or Theodosian section of Daniel 7:14. So you'll see both. You'll see Latruo in the upper one, where it relates to P967, Septuagint manuscript, and then Theodosian, and then it gives you the Vaticanus and Alexandrinus Duluo reading. Now this is probably the most detailed, or one of them, most detailed volumes of the Septuagint, the Gottingen. So this is Ziegler's Gottingen edition of Daniel. And it has probably the most detailed footnotes of the Septuagint editions that you'll find available. So, and this is like with Rolf's or with Sweets, it splits them. So on the left side versus the right side, you have two different versions of Daniel in Greek. This is what it looks like. Okay. So on page 340, you're going to see on the Septuagint side, again, the old what they consider the Old Greek side, but it again is related directly to P967. It's not like there's some old Greek Septuagint version that's older and better than everyone. No, it's an early manuscript, but again, look, it's not the oldest Greek reading, and it's not the reading in the main codices in the centuries that follow. And there's not a holistic reading even thereafter. So again, this is not a reading that you can cite with authority and say, this is what the text says, and you can't dispute this. Oh yeah, we can. It's not necessary to use Latruo at all. We're not denying that there are manuscripts that have it, but that's not sufficient to make an argument for establishing a textual reading and then condemning people over it, or to even develop your theology from. So on the on 340, it does say Latruo, and then on the right hand side, 341, where it gives the Theta or Theodosian, quote unquote, related reading. It says glossai du lu susin alto. So again, you're going to see both. And if you look at the notes, the note on the old Septuagint side, 340, it says Latrus alto 967, and then it cites Tertullian, but I'd have to look at that to see if it's citing a Latin reading or not. Either way, we'll get to some early father references in a moment. That's important to consider, but like with Justin, again, we have to look at the date of the text and whether or not it actually supports the reading in question, and whether or not in Tertullian's case we even have a Greek term used. So either way, it cites 967 and 88 Syriac Spla. So Codex Chissianus and the Syro-Hexapla right here. So in the left side of the Gottingen, you're going to see all these blues, and a reference to Tertullian. So let's see. I didn't check that reference to Tertullian because it's not what I'm really not trying to establish every single reference to all of these different readings. And again, I'd have to verify if Tertullian's reference of this text that he's citing is even a Greek reading that would provide support for a Septuagint text that in Tertullian's work is datable to the time he's said to have lived in. Right? So it could be a potential problem similar to Justin. But that's not something I need to consider in order to point out that we have a contested reading in the Septuagint of Daniel 7:14. I'm just giving you the full information from the source. Now on the right side, in the footnote to the Theta reading with Duluo, it provides some really good information. Dulu sin auto, and it cites Q, several fathers. Dulu sin auto, Codex B. Auto dulu sin, Codex A. And it cites other readings, Auto dulu susin, and then cites a variant sosin in 62 and 230. So some good variant readings on page 341 for Duluo. But those are the different main Septuagints or Septuagint versions that you'll come across or can get to try to glean additional information if you don't have the manuscripts directly available, or that you can more easily copy and show people, hey, this is what the, critical texts available today are teaching us. Now, let's just go real quickly to Heos and Hos. Right? So again, this whole question, like we were reading in our review of Daniel 7:13-14, is the Son of Man being presented to the Ancient of Days, or is he being presented as or like the Ancient of Days? Well, this isn't every reading, but it's enough of the readings to, I think, give you an idea of the kind of variants we have. Now, again, in the Aramaic version, this isn't a dispute. It's very clear he's being brought to the Ancient of Days. It's only in the Greek readings that we have this kind of variation. So here is the essential information. We have Theodotion, mid-2nd century. He uses heos, which is unto. P967 uses hos. So that's an early Septuagint manuscript in favor of as or like. Then Codex B uses heos, unto. Then we have 87-88 Codex Chissianus using hos. So it's kind of an even spread here, at least in terms of the Greek readings. There are other readings. I'm going to go over those in a moment. In fact, I'll do that right now. Let me just bring you guys up. I'm going to read from you just a section from the old Greek translation of Daniel 7-12 by Sharon Pace Jeanson. Okay, this is part of the Catholic Biblical Quarterly monograph series. So just listen carefully, okay? It's very important. It won't take but a moment. And then we're going to finish up with some New Testament texts and we're done. Very important stuff, though, so you have the information you need to show Trinitarians and others, hey, no, Daniel 7 and any other part of Daniel has nothing to do with Trinity, right? It's someone being given things he didn't have before that he'd have to have before if he was God before. But he wasn't God before, and he's not God now. He's the Son of Man, the Son of God, being given all those things now. Now, whether he's given the Truo or Duluo, the fact is we have disputed reading that likely favors Duluo, at least in the Greek text. And so it's not something we can use either way. It's not a question in the Aramaic text, so we should just rely on what we know and not try to establish our false doctrine from contested information. Page 96. Daniel 7:13, the Ancient of Days, one of the most important verses in the OG of Daniel, which has been cited as evidence of theological tendency on the part of the OG translator, is 7:13. In his examination, Bruce, F.F. Bruce, claims to have uncovered interpretive material which reveals an astonishing statement about the one like a son of man, that he appeared as the Ancient of Days. And then the footnote is to Bruce's the oldest Greek version of Daniel. This is what influenced a lot of Trinitarians too. And then Gene Sun gives a listing of the different readings, gives the Masoretic text. It gives the, basically 967, P967, the old Greek reading, the oldest Greek manuscript reading, which uses hos or as. No, I'm sorry. The oldest Greek reading uses heos. It looks like it. At least what they're showing as the old Greek. We show that as it. Actually, I showed that as hos. So we'll see. Showing that as the Omicron. Just verify here. The origins. Okay, so origins text uses heos. 88 Syria Hexapla, so Codex Chissianus of the 9th to 11th century and the Syria Hexapla translation of Origen's 5th column. Those use hos. Okay, so right here, this is what Gene Sun is showing. Along with this, I'm going to try to get as much information in here accurately. Remember, this is a Syriac translation of the 7th century. So we have hos being shown here. We have of course, we have the Aramaic reading, and then we have her citing Origen here as saying heos, but we have the Syria Hexapla as hos, and we have Theodotion as using heos, until. Okay, and that's right here. I don't see that she's showing these just yet. Not on page 96. So I'll continue from there. It is important to note that Bruce presents as the Septuagint version the reading of 88S SYH, the Sweet edition, and not that of the text established by Ziegler in the Gottingen. I just showed you both of those. Bruce offers two explanations to account for the reading of Kai Hos Palaios and as or like ancient. 1. Hos is probably used as an adverbial conjunction of time with the following sense: as, parentheses, when the Ancient of Days arrived. Then Kai, the bystanders were present beside him, or then the bystanders presented him, referring to the text where it says they brought him before him. Depending on whether one accepts pares and alto or the Syro-Hexaplaric marginal reading of pra te gagan altan. 2. Hos is an ordinary conjunction yielding the astonishing statement of the translator that the Son of Man appeared as the Ancient of Days, which is kind of what we're getting at. Then she goes on to say, it's presently our task to investigate whether Bruce has adequately distinguished between the OG translation, Origen's text, and possible scribal changes prior or subsequent to Origen. It's true that the aberrant readings would have been of particular noteworthiness to Christian exegetes, but before we conclude that it is the OG translator and not a secondary scribe who engages in intentional theological tendency, we must first subject the above text to text critical investigation. Although 88 Syria Hexapla has Kai Hos Palaios Hemeron Parain as Ancient of Days, We note that Ziegler has reconstructed the Old Greek as kai heos palaiou, hemeron, porein. And he came unto the Ancient of Days. That's in the main text of the Gottingen. This is what he's talking about is Ziegler. So he's saying he reconstructed that. It is precisely this reconstruction with which Bruce disagrees. Ziegler notes that Tertullian, Cyprian, and consultations are based on OG witnesses to heos to palaiou, and not to hos palaios. So he's saying Ziegler believes Tertullian, Cyprian, and the consultationes are based on Old Greek witnesses to heos. Again, I'd have to verify that just like I'd have to verify Tertullian with respect to the note in Ziegler about latruo. But they can still cite things like Tertullian's Latin text or the Syria Hexapla translation into Syriac as evidence of a reading in the Greek if it reflects it in the non-Greek text. So he cites Tertullian, Cyprian, Consultationis as Old Greek witnesses to heos, or based on Old Greek witnesses, not hos. Moreover, Ziegler suggests the probability that heos, unto, was corrupted to hos, as or like, because of the preceding phrase, hos huios anthropou, as a son of man. Furthermore, the immediately preceding chi makes the loss of epsilon more understandable, since it's just one letter. Since heos was corrupted to hos, the genitive palaiou would have been hypercorrected to the nominative palaios in order for the phrase to be grammatically correct. Montgomery agrees that the text of Origen, which he incorrectly identifies with the Old Greek, preserves the aberration, calling hos palaios an ancient error. Therefore, instead of calling hos palaios an example of great interpretive weight on the part of the Old Greek translator, it should rather be seen as a secondary scribal development in the transmission history of the Greek texts, talking about hos, as or like the Ancient of Days, should be seen as a secondary scribal development in the transmission history of the Greek text, probably happening in two stages, heos to hos, inadvertent loss, then palaiou to palaios, deliberate correction. As illustrations of the first stage, there are several similar secondary corruptions which follow this pattern in the recensional history of the Old Greek of Daniel as well. This is page 98. This same type of confusion occurs in Daniel 2:43, where P967 has kai heos, but 88 Syria Hexapla has kai hos. And in 430, parentheses 33, where P96 reads hos and 88 Syria Hexapla has heos. Furthermore, we note that in 1012 there's a loss of n after iselthon. In 1015 there's a loss of kata. In 1115 u is omitted, and kai is lacking in 1112 in secondary developments to the Old Greek. Last paragraph, page 99. This investigation of Daniel 7:13 shows that to make a judgment about putative tendens in the Old Greek based solely on Origen's O text, without knowledge of the history of the text of Daniel, constitutes a serious methodological error. It is essential first to establish critically the Old Greek text and to inquire into the vorlage, the underlying text of the Old Greek. In this example, the Old Greek translator accurately conveyed the text. Later corruptions and changes infiltrated the text, accounting for the variations now in the text of 88 Syria Hexapla, which would be hos. A study of the layers of textual development opens the possibilities of more clearly focused judgments concerning textual variants and for a more accurate assessment of the Old Greek translation. So once again, at best, we have a contestant variant between unto and as, but that isn't seen as favoring as in the development of the text for the reasons that I just read from Gene Song. So once again, this cannot be cited, even less so, I would argue, based on the type of variation we have, right? One letter versus a whole term, and the way in which this could happen, and the examples that Gene Song gave of how this does happen in these texts, in specifically P967. Can't use this stuff to conclusively say this is what they were believing and teaching, what we're going to use to condemn you as a heretic if you don't believe it. Give me a break, okay? Is this the best you have for Latruo and for Hulse? Because it's not enough to even establish your reading as most likely. And so there's no way you can use it to override the undisputed Aramaic text and then try to tell us that there's a whole new teaching that doesn't coincide with everything else. And speaking of everything else, let's just go ahead and get to it. Because here is everything else in the discussion we are having of the Son of Man. You ready? Let's finish it up, everybody. Here we go. Son of Man in the New Testament. Excuse me. So we just saw in Daniel, there's no way you could get Trinity, right, from the Son of Man in Daniel. It's literally completely opposite. It's the Son of Man receiving things he didn't have. That's undisputed. Being given rulership, dignity, and kingdom, all of it. No, there's no way he could be God in that context at all. And we've shown that the two primary issues that have to do with the confusion spread by Trinitarians are at best contested readings and likely not even favoring their position. And they're in the Greek text, not the Aramaic. Matthew 16:13. Now, when he had come into the parts of Caesarea Philippi, Jesus went asking his disciples, who are men saying the Son of Man is? Matthew 16:14. They said, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Verse 15, he said to them, you though, who do you say I am? Verse 16, in answer, Simon Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Verse 17, in response, Jesus said to him, happy are you are Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal it to you, but my Father who is in the heavens did. I'm citing this because it connects the Son of Man directly with being the Christ and the Son of the living God, and Jesus affirming this connection. Matthew 16:27. There's nothing about being God here, or part of a Trinity deal, right? It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. You're going to see in every one of these texts exactly what you saw in Daniel 7. The Son of Man being given things he wasn't given before, along with other people being given things they weren't given before, all so they can do what they weren't doing before and be given the appropriate service, even worship, for the positions they now have given by God to represent him. None of which conclusively involve Latruo. Even if they did, it would be after what Jesus said to the devil, which would be acceptable, I believe, because it's something God's permitting. If he permits it, it's acceptable. It's as simple as that. Matthew 16:27, the Son of Man is destined to come in the glory of his Father with his angels and recompense each one according to his behavior. Again, Son of Man directly in the context with the glory of his Father, the Ancient of Days, the Most High, the one who gave him kingdom, dignity, and rulership, the very glory he's coming in right here. So again, this is very Danielic connection material right here, connects directly with the type of things we saw in those visions. Matthew 19:28, Jesus said to them, truly I say to you, in the recreation, when the Son of Man sits down on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also yourself sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Right, consistent, of course, with what we read in Revelation 3:21 and Revelation 24. Talked about recently. We'll come back to that in a moment. Matthew 24:27. As lightning comes, out of eastern parts and shines over to western parts, so the presence of the Son of Man will be. Talks about the carcass, the eagles, the tribulation. Verse 30, sign of the Son of Man will appear, and all the tribes of the earth will beat themselves in lamentation. They'll see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And we just saw, what's that glory? Right here. Glory of his Father. Glory's been given. Glory received from the Ancient of Days, Daniel 7. He will send forth his angels with a great trumpet sound. They will gather his chosen ones together from the four winds. Holy ones are the supreme ones, right there. His chosen ones. 25:31, when the Son of Man arrives in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit down on his glorious throne. What's that glory he's coming in? Exactly, right there, Ancient of Days, Most High. It's still his glory because he received it. All the nations are being gathered before him, just like in Daniel 7. The nations who actually serve or even worship to the extent that God permits, because he's appointing his Son and the holy ones of the Supreme One to represent him, to effectively be him to these people, which is why they're ruling them. You'll see how that happens even further in a moment. He separates them here, as we know. But again, this is the Son of Man arriving in his glory, glory of his Father. Here he is before the high priest. The high priest says, I tell you by the living God, are you the Christ, Son of God? Jesus said to him, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven, right there. Daniel 7, right there, clouds of heaven, Son of Man. Where is he sitting? Right hand of power. Exactly, Ancient of Days, Most High, right there. Mark 8:38, whoever becomes ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he arrives in the glory of his Father, once again, with his holy angels, or the holy angels. Mark 13:24, they'll see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. Gather his chosen ones, holy ones of the Supreme One, glory of his Father. Again, no Trinity here, everybody. There's nothing here in any of these texts, as you're going to see in the rest of them, that in any way has anything to do with what these liars try to talk about when they cite these texts. Especially in Daniel, right? We get Sam and others citing Daniel 7 like it's somehow what? Proving nothing that they believe. The exact opposite, in fact, right? Just like with God, just like with all this stuff. They literally lie to everybody and claim that these later pagan beliefs are in these texts that teach nothing at all like what they're telling us and aren't even, for the readings they want, conclusive. So these people are crazy, and they're reinterpreting all these words like God to mean something they don't mean, and reinterpreting all these texts to mean something they don't mean. Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? Mark 14:61, 14:62, Jesus says, I am. It's not ego and me that he's God, you perverts. So obvious here, the predicate is in response to the question, Christ, Son of the Blessed One. Yes, that's who I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. All Daniel 7 again, all subordinate to the Most High again. There's no Trinity here. There's no nothing at all like what they try to tell us about here. He rips his garments apart because they don't accept him as the Son of Man of Daniel. Just like they don't accept that Stephen is seeing Jesus at God's right hand in Acts 7 and try to stone him. And what is it describing right here? The very thing Stephen sees in Acts 7. Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power. They're just rejecting that Jesus is the Son of Man here and in Acts 7. And that's why they go insane, just like Sam goes insane when we prove that there's one God, the Father, not a pagan Trinity. Luke 9:26, whoever becomes ashamed of me and my words, Son of Man will be ashamed of him, of this one, when he arrives in his glory and that of the Father and of the holy angels. Maybe that's why Justin Martyr wanted to worship them. Either way, no Trinity. Luke 12:8, I say to you, everyone that confesses union with me before men, the Son of Man will also confess union with him before the angels of God, or disown him before the angels of God. Glory of the Father. Everyone who says a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven him, but he that blasphemes against the Holy Spirit, it will not be forgiven him. Have you ever wondered why it doesn't mention the Father here? Because it does, right? It's the Father's Spirit, right? That's the Father right there. If you blaspheme the Father's Holy Spirit the way Sam and others do, yeah, Yeah. You can just tie a big mountain around your neck and throw yourself into the ocean if you want to save yourself some punishment. Either way, why is this forgivable? If the Son of Man of Daniel 7 is co-equal member of a Trinity, and everyone's supposed to be giving him Latruo, but this one is not. Someone want to explain that? I don't think that Trinitarians can, right? They never have. This is the Father right here. So they blow that too. Luke 21, sun, moon, and stars. They'll see the Son of Man coming in the cloud. Power, great glory, glory of the Father. 21:36, you can be standing before the Son of Man. It's like it says. Daniel 7, Daniel 12. People are going to stand up for their part at the end of the days. 22:67, if you're the Christ, tell us. 22:69, you'll see the Son of Man sitting at the powerful right hand of God. Are you therefore the Son of God? You yourselves are saying that I am. What do we need further witness? It's just like Acts 7. We don't agree with him. He says he's going to be sent at the right hand of God. No Trinity, but we still don't agree with him, and we're pagans, so we'll try to stone him. Just like Stephen, Acts 7. Same thing. Trinitarians always ignore that. John 5, we already know this, right? Game over, no Trinity. If they were co-equal members of a Trinity, sharing the same nature eternally, they would already all have the same life in themselves. That's the whole point of being consubstantial, right? No Trinity. And he's given him authority to do judging. Why? He's the Son of Man. He gets this in Daniel, right? Right here's the authority right here that he's been given in Daniel 7. All that authority you see, rulership, dignity, and kingdom, includes that right there. Son of Man, given life, no Trinity. 6:27, the Son of Man will give you the life that he'll give you. For upon this one, the Father, even God, has put his seal. So God approves him, Son of Man, just like Ancient of Days, Most High, Daniel 7. John 8, Jesus said, when once you've lifted up the Son of Man, you'll know I am he. Ego eimi, anihu, he stands for the predicate in the context. What is that? Right here. That's who he says they're going to know he is, the Son of Man. And that means he does nothing of his own, but as the Father taught him. That's essentially the same thing as the Father giving him all authority, power, and kingdom. Right? He's not just saying, okay, I'm not going to help you at all. Just here, you get all the power. No, he's saying right here, I learned everything from him. I'm not God. I'm not part of a Trinity. You can stop your paganism, okay? It's embarrassing. I'm the Son of Man. I was given all this stuff. Father taught me. I didn't know it from eternity. We're not consubstantial. John 13:31 ends, when he had gone out, the Son of Man is glorified and God is glorified in connection with him. Right. Just like Philippians 2:9-11 says. He's raised up to the position he didn't have before his Lord, to the glory of God the Father. He's always glorified, so God is glorified. God is not glorified, so someone else is glorified, unless he's glorifying them for his glory. It's real simple. If you forget, check Isaiah 43:7. Acts 7:55, but he, being full of Spirit, Holy Spirit, talking about Stafford, we were talking about him, gazed in heaven, caught sight of God's glory, and Jesus staying at God's right hand. Staying at God's right hand, you perverts. They never figure this stuff out. Look, I behold the heavens open up and the Son of Man staying at God's right hand, right there. Daniel 7, Ancient of Days, Most High, separation from God, no Trinity. Game over, everybody. Hebrews 2:8, you subjected all things under his feet. For in that he subjected all things to him, God left nothing. Hey, Trinitarians, it says you subjected all things and left nothing that's not subject to him. Yep, but that's a quote from Psalm 8 talking about humans, and the angels weren't made subject to us. Right, it's talking about all the things that were made in the created earth. So it's context specific, just like we tell you guys all the time, no Trinity. But you guys also make a big deal about, these extended negations, and you never contextualize them or note parallels. Now, though, we do not yet see all things in subjection to him, but we behold Jesus, who's been made a little lower than the angels, like we tell you perverts, crowned with glory and honor for having suffered death. He did that to make the chief agent perfect through sufferings. Why? Not God, no Trinity, or he'd already be perfect. He had to be perfect in a way he wasn't perfect already, because even though he's perfect without sin, he wasn't God. Therefore, he had to stem, like all of us, from one and be made perfect through his sufferings. all stem from one equals ek henos pantes. All out of one. Just like 1 Corinthians 8:6 teaches you perverts. For this cause he's not ashamed to call them brothers, right? Because unlike in Revelation 21, where the Alpha and the Omega says, you'll be my son, we're his brothers. He's going to declare our name to your brothers. In the middle of the congregation was song. All have trust with him. Look, I and the young children Jehovah gave me. Right? These are his brothers, whom the Father, the Alpha and the Omega of Revelation 21, gave to him. Revelation 1, we're almost done, everyone. Very clear. No Trinity, Son of Man, Daniel, New Testament. Revelation 1, someone like a Son of Man, verse 13. His head and his hair were white as wool, as snow. His eyes, fire as flame. His feet were fine like copper, glowing in a furnace. His voice was as the sound of many waters. Had in his hand 7 stars, sharp, long, two-edged sword out of his mouth. And his countenance was as the sun when it shines in his power. Described almost exactly like the spirits in Daniel 10. Very minor difference, showing that even as the Son of Man, yeah, he's a spirit. He's not a human being. Not here. He was on earth, of course, made lower than the angels. That's different. This is not. That's why he's described in these terms. These are not human descriptions. That's why Paul says it wasn't something human. It wasn't a man that I got this apostleship from. It was this bright, blinding light. That's all these descriptions that John saw. No Trinity, no dual nature. Revelation 14:14, upon the clouds, someone seated like a son of man with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. One seated on the cloud. Not the one seated on the throne, Trinitarians. He's on his throne, on his Father's throne, but he's not the one seated on the throne. We have a whole video about it. Alpha and Omega. That's it, everybody. Those are the totality of significant New Testament texts and texts in Daniel that involve the Son of Man. Did you see anything in any way that relates to the Trinity, right? Or that could even in any way be consistent with it, unless you're a pervert, a pagan, and a liar? Exactly, neither did I. Even if we gave them their 2 variants in Daniel 7:13-14. Hos and Latruo, they're contingent. Right, they're based on him being given those things or made to be that way. If he's appearing as the Ancient of Days, right? It's not what the Aramaic says, but if we grant the Hebrew just for the sake of argument, even here as we see in Revelation, right, this is after he's firstborn from the dead, right? He's made a life-giving spirit, 1 Corinthians 15:45. Exactly. That's how he's created as firstborn from the dead. So there's really nothing that would be a problem for him to be as or like the Ancient of Days. He does kind of look like him there, but they all look like that. Like I said in Daniel 10, they're described in these kind of fiery terms. You do have the wool, white hair, right? So there's a similarity. He is his son, his firstborn one, the imprint, right? So we know there's temporal distinction and a distinction, fire from fire. They'll figure it out someday, maybe. Either way, there's no Trinity in the use of the Son of Man in Daniel or the New Testament.